Good afternoon. I'm Ron Moore, and we're at Moore Gallery this afternoon to introduce you to Gord Smith. We're opening a one-man show of Gord Smith's sculpture in our gallery in Hess Village, and we're just here to have a casual conversation with Gord, talk to him about his career and about his interest in art through his lifetime. And I just, first of all, like to say that we're very, very pleased to have this exhibition. It's our first one-man exhibition of sculpture in our gallery, and it's a fantastic exhibition. It's just gorgeous. If you have time, come by the gallery. It runs until April the 27th, and it's a very, very special exhibition. Anyways, this is Gord Smith sitting here beside me, and I'd like to, first of all, ask you, Gord, what made you decide to be an artist? What was the reason that you decided you were going to be an artist rather than an accountant or a lawyer or a dentist or something like that? What was...
Well, it's a long story. I have been involved with aesthetics most of my life. I have paintings still in my possession that I did when I was 5 years old. And I got interested in sculpture around the age of 15 or so. I started to do some pottery, and I was carving stone and wood and making concrete pieces of sculpture, and gradually got into it that way. I've always been interested in structures, and architecture is one of my great loves, and found that I just slid into it.
So there wasn't any person in your background, like your father or your mother or anyone that you looked up to that sort of encouraged you to be an artist? It sort of came automatic.
Well, on the contrary, it was thought. I have a cousin who's a sculptor, presently living in France, Jimmy Ritchie, and he would be 5 years older than I. And it was thought by aunts and uncles and father and mother and most people around me in those days that it was kind of silly to not another artist, it was thought. So there wasn't a hell of a lot of support that way, but I was a very quiet, shy boy, and found that was a way that I could get in touch with my feelings and through my art.
Yeah, this seems to be the case with a lot of artists, in that they don't get a tremendous amount of encouragement when they're young, because it's a very tough career. It's not easy to be a professional artist. And as far as you're concerned, the number of years that you've been sculpting and working full time as an artist, what's been the secret as far as you're concerned? Is there
the way that I go about it is through the material. I've always been, as I say, interested in different materials and working with different materials, because each material will let you in on its natural processes. And I think that more than anything runs throughout most of my work, most of my expression. I've never been afraid to change. On the contrary, I've always been excited to tackle stainless steel and to find out how it will go together and find the tension in it and find the polish in it and find the different levels in the surface of stainless. When I came to casting bronze seriously, which basically this show is it's from that 9-year period, when I first really started to cast bronze. And what I found was that when I took molten wax, because I make my sculptures out of wax first, and when I poured that molten wax into cold water, it crystallized and formed a great energy within that structure. And also, having been a welder and done lots of things with molten metals, I found the similarity between the structures in the wax when it cooled and also the structures in bronze when it cooled. If I took molten bronze and simply poured it on the floor, those structures were very similar to the structures that I found in wax. And so I tried to integrate those happenings that occur in wax and leave those parts within the sculptures themselves, so that there is an honesty. There is, you can feel it. You can feel that that attunement, I suppose, or that sensitivity to the raw material, and then bring it forward and bring it into whatever form it happens to take, because I seldom plan forms. I simply sit down and start working, and it happens.
Well, I'd be interested to know initially what made you move towards sculpture rather than painting, in that there are a vast number of artists that work on canvas, and there seem to be far fewer artists working in sculpture. What do you think is the difference between a person staying with painting and a person that goes into sculpture? Is it just a difference in their personality, or is it...
I think it comes down to it being very simple. I found most satisfaction from working with many facets rather than simply one surface, with one dimension. I found it much more satisfying to be involved with it all around. It's just my personality, the way I'm set up. I don't really know. I simply am charged that way.
Right. So it happened naturally, is what you're basically saying.
Yeah.
Talk about your, high school, college, university, the people that influenced you, and how your art teaching progressed. Did you find that it was advantageous? Did you find it was a waste of time? I mean, some artists are purely self-taught. They learn nothing from anyone else. They do it their own way. How did you find those years?
Well, the most interesting, again, as I said before, I was very shy and tended to spend a lot of time by myself. My father worked in a company, a real estate company, and they had a collection of the group of 7. And that was an early influence. I know he used to bring the paintings home and I would copy them, that sort of thing. But when I got into high school, I had problems reading. I'm dyslexic. I found that out only 10, 15 years ago. And so I wouldn't occupy my time with reading or a great deal of studying. I was either playing my drums or trumpet or whatever else, and doing sculpture and paintings and just generally playing with things, I've always had that sort of thing that's very dear to me. I love to play. Later on, I ran into a teacher who was a Shakespeare teacher in high school, and he instilled in me, or opened that part up of me that was that reality that's in between the realities, the feeling that Shakespeare had, and the poetry. And shortly after that, in my first year of college, I met another teacher who was also an English teacher. And he greatly influenced me as well. And what was interesting is that the first teacher taught the second teacher. And they both opened me up to that unknown dimension, that is the feeling dimension, the thing that occurs when you travel between two dimensions and stay sensitive to both. The dimension, let's say, of the very high polish, and the dimension of the inside, the organic, growing part of it, and then to sculpt the shapes in between there, so that they're neither on this plane nor in that plane. They're in between, and it tended to create a feeling. I think that's what a lot of people have expressed to me from looking at my work.
What about your art teachers? Did you have art teachers that, I mean, when you were in high school and then moving into college?
No, self-taught.
Yeah, were you, you were definitely on track at that point. You realized that at a young age you were going to be an artist. You didn't have other things on your mind.
Well, I didn't really know. Shortly after I got into college, I took a job with an architect during the summer months and got involved in architecture, and I was really very much influenced by Mies van der Rohe, Frank Lloyd Wright, architects of that nature. So a lot of the structural knowing in my work came from that part of my studies. And then I went into studying engineering and architecture for a couple of years, and all the time I was doing that, I was doing my art. At that time, when I was about 20 years old, I'd already had 3 one-man shows in art, not art galleries as such, but more like I had one in a cafe, and another one I had at Gemps Brothers art supply store. So I was doing that at a very young age, and building it up that way. What occurred was a good friend of mine, Peter Fodor, at that time was my best man at my first marriage. He introduced my work to George Wellington, and he liked it and gave me my first major exhibition in Montreal at the age of 21. And I sold a good number of the pieces. I received my first commission, which was for the Fraser Hickson Library in Montreal, an 8-foot bronze. And so I was on my way. I had made a little bit of money, and I could see that I didn't want to really pursue architecture. I had seen enough of it, and I had seen the way in which architects must operate in order to survive, and that really wasn't the deepest part of myself. So I was happy to find myself in that flow.
Right, right. In your biography, there's quite a concentration of major commissions. Maybe what you could do is spend a few minutes talking about your commissions. The Bell Canada, you did a very major commission for Expo, and these things, they must be fabulous to take on the A. LePage Commission. I mean, all these things, it must just be fantastic for you to have that kind of freedom and to get involved in something
well,
like that,
as you know, there's a great deal of work before one obtains a commission,
Yeah.
and I've been fortunate enough and stubborn enough to insist that what I do is what I do and not what is asked for by an architect. But I would spend lots of time talking about the light that is available, the placement of the pieces, the scale of the pieces, the material to be used, and things like that. But it's a great deal of work, as you can well imagine, to build 12.5-foot bronzes, cast them all up and put them all together. It's really a job.
And the cost is quite high too.
Oh,
I know we've discussed that, the cost of materials, and I think this must be at times difficult for an artist, a sculptor, in that you're selling a product that there's a lot of costs that people obviously aren't relating to, that, you know, like for instance a painter doesn't have the same cost of material that a sculptor does.
Not anywhere near.
And when you look at a painting that might be selling for $5,000, anyone that's been collecting art for a period of time gets used to that price. But then all of a sudden you look at a small sculpture and it's $5,000, and someone thinks that it's too expensive, but they don't realize the painting might have taken someone a half an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours to do, whereas that sculpture might have taken you 3 weeks to do.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So,
plus the cost of the material, if you're casting bronze, in comparison to building a painting, are just, you know, you can't relate it. Let's say a painting might cost you $250 to produce. a comparable piece of sculpture that would sell in the same range as that would maybe cost you $1,500 to produce.
And there's some sculptures here that are even 20, 25 years old. How do you see your work progressing from the early work to the most recent work?
Well, I'd have to get into the most recent work just a little bit, and that is the time-space exploration. I have associated that time-space exploration with a word triptych, with a color triptych, and with form triptych. And what I have found, to my amazement, is that in my work over a period of 30 years, I have gone through the same sequence unknowingly. And what we see here is basically the last sequence. They start with the pillar figures, which is the human being coming out of the cube, the square, and it moves into the flying figures, the Icarus, the spirit, and then goes into relics, which are cathedrals. Some people see them as being destroyed, other people see them as growing. And so it goes through that sequence. I've also included some numerical sequences of the bases. And also within that whole context of the show, there are forms. These squares, this is a square with a circle taken out of it. And you'll see around the show cubes, tetrahedrons, and different explorations of those forms. So the whole thing is in a triptych count all the way through it, and when you get finished with it, it starts over again, depending on your consciousness.
Okay, what I would like to do is concentrate some time talking about the commissions, the Ava Page commission, which I find extremely exciting. I think it's just fantastic. The commission that you did for Expo. Talk a little bit about how they came about, the process. You know, like, let's cover the whole thing. You know, there's a lot that people don't know about sculpture, the process of making them, and you know, I'd just like you to concentrate on on this area.
Okay. In 1965, I was given the largest commission ever given to a Canadian for the front of the Canadian Pavilion, the Katimavik. I built it out of Corten steel, and it ended up being 110 feet long, 10 feet high, 3 feet wide, and weighed 13 tons. The process through which I got it was pretty much one of the government was looking for someone to do that. So I was in competition with people. Once they decided that it was me that they wanted, then I produced a series of models, maquettes, for the site, playing with light, playing with different shapes, playing with the whole area. It was a vast area that I was given to sculpt in. The result of that came very quickly. They enjoyed what I had done, the fact that I had worked the piece. It's called the Canada Screen, and it has 10 provinces and the Yukon and the Northwest Territories hidden within it, all sculpted kind of in that space, along with each of the capitals of each of the provinces, also hidden and sculpted into that space. It took 2.5 years to build it once I had received the commission, and installed it. I was told that the piece, the work of art, would find a final resting place either on the site where it was, or that it would be transported to a park in Ottawa or something of that nature. What ensued was unfortunate, because they destroyed the piece when they took it apart. They didn't bother to contact me, and I was still working with the Waddington Galleries in those days. And it was just bad news all the way through. I was then called to Ottawa to give an estimate on the damage of it. It was put into a warehouse there, and when I saw that piece, I broke right down, naturally. It was just ruined. What I then did was buy it back. They finally decided that they weren't going to do anything with it. They weren't going to repair it. And so I thought, well, I've got to save it. And I borrowed the money, bought it back as scrap, and spent 9 months rebuilding it, along with another workman. Then I, of course, tried to sell it back to someone or other, and have been unable to do so ever since. It's completely rebuilt. It weighs an extra 3 tons, and is presently in storage in a gravel pit north of Montreal that is very close to my old studio. So there it sits, and there's some interest in getting it for Expo 86 for the Canadian Pavilion out there, but I'm going to wait on that one.
Yeah, right.
What happens there.
Right. What about the some of the others that you've done? The A. LePage, for instance, the sculpture that you have in their building. Tell us a little bit about that, and I think if you could touch a little bit on this lost wax technique, explaining to people exactly how these bronze castings are made.
Well, for the bronze castings, I found that if I worked directly with the wax and built it so that the thickness was a good casting thickness, so that the bronze would flow properly in the shell, that I could take away that in-between process, which you find that most people, if they're going to cast, they'll work in plaster, in cement, in many other materials, and then they will have to take a rubber mold of that sculpture, put wax into the rubber mold, and then go through the casting process. But I was able to eliminate that in-between process and get a much clearer, much sharper registration with the wax, because it's hand-worked. Then the wax is taken and dipped in a ceramic shell, which is very much like flour and water, and set up to dry. And each time you dip it in, it builds up a coating around the wax so that it is strong enough to be able to hold the bronze when you pour it in. You then leave a certain section open of it, turn it upside down, put it into a blast furnace. The wax melts out of it and leaves the exact shape inside the shell. And the shell becomes very hard, very much like a ceramic plate, very strong. Then you take that shell, tip it upside down again, and pour molten bronze into it. Now, in amongst all of those processes, there are ways and means to get that bronze to flow properly in there. So some of them I tilt on their side so that there's agitation within the pouring so that it cleans the bronze as it comes up. And different little tricks and things that I've discovered along the way, because I don't let anybody else do my work. When I go to the foundry to work, I do the work. And that's the way I've found innovative ways of building things, through the work of other people, through paying attention, watching how it works, and paying attention to what happens when if something goes wrong. What happened there? And maybe you get something that goes wrong that really can give you an idea for another sculpture or another starting point so that you can go on. It's really most fascinating.
There's one other question I'm interested to ask you, and that, looking at your early sculpture, things that you did when you were much younger than you are today, in relation to what you've been doing recently, or in the last, say, 9 years. How do you look at your early attempts at sculpture in relation to now? Do you look back and say this was terrible, or do you look back and say this was great, or do you look back and, I mean, you must, I think every artist
early
must.
on, I suppose I did that. I thought, first of all, I would think poorly of older pieces. And now what I tend to do with my mind is take whatever is in them that still excites me, and to know that that part of the sculptures is the part that brought me along.
Exactly, yeah.
So I view it more historically rather than critically, you know.
So they really played an important part in your
absolutely.
in your evolution. The same as the
Everything.
things that you're doing now will play an important part of the things that you're doing 20 years from now.
Sure, and you'll notice that in the show there's a piece called The Ruler, which was built some 25 years ago out of steel, welded, electrically welded, and you'll notice the top portion of the ruler is very similar to some of the top heads of the pillar figures. And there's almost 20 years in between them. So they're unconsciously. I mean, it's never really been a conscious choice of mine. It just seems to build itself that way, and that more than anything is what my work is about. It is just letting it happen. You've got to get out there and do it, but you can't really control it. You can't take it over and try and say something. I can't. I simply let it flow and let it happen and go in the areas that most excites me.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Gord, for the exhibition first.
This is your community channel. Get involved.